Candace decided to be incredibly brave and vulnerable and asked about sharing her story around motherhood. I'm not going to give too much away. And I'm reading my cue cards and you're going to love this. Just get your Kleenex out. It's fine. You're going to feel this one right here. I couldn't be more proud of this woman and what she has accomplished throughout her life, but also in our time together. So here is Candace Miskelly and her story, Surrender.
Thanks, Courtney, for that lovely introduction. I don't know if you saw it, but I already have tissues, so bear with me. And I have not been fortunate enough to have mine memorized as well as the rest of the group. It's too close to home, and my brain just wouldn't allow me to memorize it. But I hope I do it justice.
She has said it many times without crying. It's just when you're in front of people, everything feels a bit heightened.
Okay, so. As I stand here today, I can vividly hear the words of one of my college professors after I flunked my public speaking portion of my final assignment, saying, "You may not have done well today, but if you ever want to improve your skills, I suggest you get involved with Toastmasters." Well, that was about 28 years ago, and I totally dismissed the idea because I wanted absolutely nothing to do with public speaking ever again. Until about 5 or 6 years ago, when the idea of public speaking shifted, and I knew it was something that I not only wanted to do, but had to do. So much so that it started showing up on the vision board as a future vision of myself. There's one slight problem. Where does one find a stage to fulfill a dream, to public speak, and to get over their fear of public speaking? Well, that's where Courtney comes into play. Not that I thought my first stage would be this vulnerable, but it did offer me an opportunity to stretch myself to the edge of my discomfort and share a side of motherhood with you that I rarely ever speak of, if ever at all. The side of motherhood that I desperately wanted and dreamed about, but never happened. You see, I'm not a mom. And every time I meet someone new and they ask me the question, "Have you got any kids?" I shrink and I simply say something along the lines of, "No, I haven't. It wasn't in the cards for me." Then I quickly avert the conversation away to something else so that I don't have to share the vulnerable details or put someone on the spot for a conversation that requires space to be heard. But there are days where I wanted to share the truth and say this instead. No, I don't have kids. But I remember the moment I knew I wanted to be a mom. It was around 1990. I was about 15 years old, and it was the era where teenage pregnancies were on the rise, or at least that was true where I lived. And I was walking with one of my teenage pregnant friends. It was early summer. She was wearing a green maternity summer dress. And it was the first time I'd ever spent that kind of time with a pregnant woman. And I remember being fascinated with her pregnancy, watching her pregnant belly grow, and the magic of the female body creating another human being. And in that moment, I knew that I wanted that for myself. I knew I wanted the experience of pregnancy, growing a tiny human, and the roller coaster of motherhood. But I also knew a few things too. I knew I didn't want to be a young mom like many of my teenage friends, because even at my age, I knew life would be more challenging for them. But I also knew I didn't want to be an older mom either. And for context, I'm 15, I can't even drive. So the idea of being 30 or 40 was incredibly old in my mind. Not to mention, my mom was getting married to her second husband in her late 30s, and they were talking about having a baby. So you can imagine in my teenage brain just how absurd I thought that idea was, and how easily I came to that conclusion for myself. So I went on to live my life, not really thinking about motherhood. I went to school, traveled a tiny bit, had some fun like 20-year-olds do, got a job and a boyfriend too. Life was good and things were really good between us too. We were happy, we were young, and our whole lives ahead of us. Then one day we were out for dinner at Kelsey's, and I remember the restaurant was busy, and he asked me about starting a family. And I was a bit shocked, and I remember thinking, or maybe my response was something along the lines of, "You can't be serious. Don't you think we're a bit young?" I don't remember ever really giving him an answer in either direction. I just knew that we were young, not well established. And instead of being excited, I panicked. I knew we were young, not well established, and the idea was too overwhelming. So instead of addressing my fears and insecurities, I ran and eventually ended that relationship. And to this day, I don't know whatever happened to him, but I do hope that he is happy, healthy, and that he has grown children of his own, and maybe even grandkids too. So fast forward a few years, I'm 25, back in school again, and I meet my future husband. We dated a few years, got engaged, moved into our first house just 4 weeks before our wedding day, and we married on New Year's Eve, 2004. And that first year of marriage was a complete whirlwind after receiving a job offer that could not be passed up. So we sold a house, bought a new house, and moved hours away from home to a small beachside rural town. And after the dust settled, around my 31st birthday, for the first time since that summer day, walking with my teenage pregnant friend, I thought about motherhood and starting a family. Because in my mind, having a family was the natural progression of a marriage. Our ages were just right, and we were established well enough with my husband's career that for me it was a no-brainer. Unfortunately, my husband wasn't ready at the time, which was fine. We could table it for a while. Sorry. Yes, sorry. But the proverbial clock was ticking, and I wasn't getting any younger. So another year or so passed, my longing grew. But this time, when I approached the topic, instead of him being ready, he turned the excuse onto me and what I needed to fix about me. So you'd think with a reason like that, I would have found a way to address my shortcomings, but instead it did the opposite. It brought up shame of all of my insecurities and self-worth issues, which led for me to spiral downward instead of up. It left me numb, heartbroken, lonely, and questioning my value as a mother, wife, daughter, friend, and my ability to be a parent. And the sad truth is that I knew there was a sliver of truth in what he had to say. I grew up in a dysfunctional household with abuse and alcoholism, and I often questioned my own abilities to be a good mom. But how I interpreted his excuses only shattered my self-worth, my strength, and my confidence, and my courage. I had married a good man, and for almost 10 years, I held on to hope that something would change his mindership between us. But the elephant in the room could not be denied, and the elephant just grew and grew until there was no room left. And I knew I couldn't spend another 10 years, 10 months, or 10 days living underneath the weight of a dream that would never be. And when I finally gathered the courage to leave my marriage, in the days that followed, we had had really deep, honest, and heartfelt conversations. And it turns out it was never about me. It was about his own insecurities about being a dad. He just never shared it with me. Unfortunately, the damage was done that we had both contributed. And our hearts were broken, and there was nothing either of us could do to take back any of the pain caused in those 10 years. So there I was, almost 40, and grieving not just the loss of a marriage, but the loss of my dream of being a mom. But by sheer luck, the best therapist literally fell into my lap. And with her help, I healed from years of childhood abuse and the breakup of my marriage, allowing me to be the truest version of myself. And in the midst of that healing, I met Tom, the first man to show me what true love was, and I knew he was the one. But there was a slight problem. I was almost 41, and he was only 34. And I did not want to take away his opportunity to be a parent like it had been taken away from me. So early in dating, on about our third or fourth date, we'd hiked to this beautiful lookout on the Bruce Trail overlooking the turquoise waters of Georgian Bay. And on that lookout, I asked him his thoughts of having a family. And I explained the predicament of our age and how I didn't want to do to him what had been done to me. So I asked him to take his time with a response, because to choose me was likely choosing a life without a family. And at that point, we were better off to cut our losses, having only a few dates in than a few years in. So after a few days, we met at the beach of our lakeside town near the marina. And guess what? He chose me. Sorry, I'm snotting now.
You're not alone.
So yes, he chose me. And time stood still in that moment. And in the coming weeks, we talked a lot about parenthood and whether or not we would start a family. I had to get out of my own head of what I thought old was. But in the end, we decided we'd try for a year, only to be met with false positives, miscarriages, and a job loss too, leaving me to grieve the loss of my motherhood dream a second time, requiring so much more grace and compassion than before. Because I knew this time for sure. The door closed and the clock ran out of time. And I would never experience pregnancy, baby stages, toddler stages, birthdays, sleepovers, pool parties, Elf on the Shelf for Christmas mornings. And my heart was broken into a million pieces. Riddled with grief for a dream that would never be. And although it was difficult, in time and with Tom's help and our dog, Willow, I learned to reframe my idea of what life should be. And instead of dwelling on the life that wasn't meant for me, I surrendered to the life and the wilderness adventures that were right in front of me. Thank you.